Everyone, this is Barry Jackson, and I'm talking with one of my favorite bassists. He's been at this a while, and we're going to go into a little bit of his biography, and he's got a book. He's got a book out and an audio book in a print and audio form, if I'm correct. Mr. Victor Wooten, how are you today, sir?
Oh, I'm doing very, very well. Thanks for having me here on the show.
And have you done very much in your tours over the years? Have you made very many other visits to Kansas City?
I have, yes, on my own with my own band like tonight, and with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones.
Okay.
So I've been able to get to the city quite a few times.
Okay. And how do you find the audiences? How receptive? How receptive are they?
Very, very receptive.
Okay.
I like this part of the country. I have friends here, and it seems like I get more and more friends every time I come back. So I always love that.
Now, do you primarily reside in near Nashville, Tennessee, or?
Exactly. That is
Okay.
where I live for the last 20-something years.
Okay. Where are you originally from?
Before that, Virginia. My dad was military, so we moved around quite a bit. But from like third grade throughout high school, I lived in Virginia.
Now, how many different instruments do you play? What else do you play besides bass?
I wouldn't say I play anything else well, but I do play pretty much stringed instruments, like guitar, cello, violin, double bass. But I also play drums.
Uh-huh.
And, I know how the keyboards work, but I don't play them that well.
Yeah, I read where you and your brothers got a gig at Busch Gardens, and you originally you started out on fiddle.
Yeah. I actually got hired as a fiddle player, as a bluegrass fiddle player in the country show at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I had never played fiddle in my life. So I went to my high school orchestra teacher and asked her if I could borrow a violin. She allowed it, so I took a violin home and started learning some of the classic fiddle pieces like Orange Blossom Special, Charlie Daniels' Devil Went Down to Georgia. And got a feel of the music, and so I ended up playing fiddle and bass because the bass chair opened up also, and so I got that playing bass and fiddle at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Okay, I want to back up a little bit and tell me a little bit about your overall musical beginnings.
Sure, I have 4 older brothers. I'm the youngest of 5, and so when my brothers were young and they were learning to play music, they realized early on that they needed a bass player to have a complete band in the family. Because, see, my oldest brother, Reggie, he's with me tonight. He plays guitar. My brother, Roy, is the drummer in Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. He's known as Future Man, so he plays drums. I have another brother named Rudy that plays saxophone. And my brother, Joseph, plays keyboards. And so they knew they needed a bass player, and that became me very, very early on. And from about age 5 was when we actually started going out and doing paid gigs. And somewhere around the age of 5 or 6, which would make my oldest brother, Reggie, 13 or 14, we did a little small tour in California as the opening band for Curtis Mayfield. And basically none of us, we haven't done anything different since. We've just been playing music our whole lives.
Who would you say, because everybody picks up something, from somebody who plays the same instrument. Who would you say your early influences were on bass?
Sure. Well, it started out with my brother Reggie, because he was teaching me everything that I had to play, from like ages 3 to 6 or so. And then a little bit later, I got into, even I was going to say Stanley Clarke, but even before that, I was learning James Brown, Sly Stone, Motown. And so, of course, I was in the Larry Graham, Bootsy Collins, and a bunch of other bass players. And, a lot of bass players that I never even knew who their names were. Right. But they meant so much to me musically.
Well,
because as a young kid, I was just learning the parts. I wasn't smart enough to remember who the bass players' names were.
So if you say you mentioned listening to a lot of Motown material, then you are into who's it? James Jamerson.
James Jamerson, yes, but he's just one of of a few bass players. He's the most popular one, and he's incredible. Right. But there were other people that played on some of that stuff, and I just loved it all. But when I really started learning about names of people, I remember one of the first one being Willie Weeks.
Uh-huh.
Alfonso Johnson was another. And then I heavily got into Stanley Clarke.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, I already knew Larry Graham from Sly Stone, Bootsy Collins from James Brown. And then I got into Stanley Clarke, Jaco Pastorius, and, Marcus Miller, and the list goes on and on.
Now, who would you say, as far as who you listen to and have listened to over the years, listen to now, who would you say are the most distinct bass players besides yourself?
Oh, man, distinctive, man.
Sound.
There are many.
Right.
There are many. Stanley Clarke was always my man growing up. Stanley can play two notes, and I'll know it's him. Marcus Miller definitely has a distinctive tone.
Right.
You know it's Marcus. You can hear an old Luther Vandross record and say, okay, that's Marcus on bass. But there's a bunch of great players. There's a guy that's not as well known as Stanley and Marcus, but an incredible player, a good friend of mine. His name is Otil Burbridge.
Okay.
And he plays with the Allman Brothers also right now. And I think he's one of the best bass players in the world.
Okay.
I could just keep listing bass players because there's just so many that I love.
Have you had the pleasure of doing the blindfold test with one of the jazz magazines, one of the more prominent jazz magazines here?
No, I haven't done that yet.
Okay.
I haven't done that.
I don't even know if they still do it, but I know they used to, and
right.
But I just wondering. But so how would you say? Now you've been doing you grew up doing the bluegrass and what have you, and you jumped into so many different, played many different styles of music. How would you say that playing bluegrass influenced? Would you say it had any influence on what you play in other music forms, other music styles?
Absolutely. Because I grew up as a kid playing R&B, Motown, soul music, and so in 1981, I was in the 11th grade. And I got hired to play in this country bluegrass band. It was so different for me. So different. And all of a sudden, I found something that I really had to work at, all of a sudden. Because the music sounds simple. But to play it authentically and to really capture that feel, you have to understand it. And, it's not about playing a whole lot of notes or using a whole lot of techniques. It's a complete feel. And so I had to learn it. Also at that time, it was my first time playing pretty much, extensively every day with different musicians, meaning musicians who weren't my brothers. And I had to learn that. So all in all, it made me a better musician because I was learning, music more completely. I wasn't just doing what I was comfortable with.
Right.
I was learning a totally different style, and one I didn't particularly care for at the time.
Okay.
But I will say this too, probably without that job, you may not even be talking to me right now.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's where I met and heard about Bela Fleck. And one thing led to another, and I've been playing with Bela Fleck, for 20-something years.
What would you say you picked up from that experience that's helped you in your other projects, with Bela Fleck?
Oh, from playing with Bela?
Yeah.
Oh, man, tons of things, and not just musically. How to lead a band. Bela always says that he's a leader among equals. So the bandmates were always equal partners, even though Bela was the leader. That's a very, very cool thing.
Yeah.
I learned a whole lot about in the studio, different ways of recording or approaching recording a CD. But also our music was so different, and because of the musicians that were in that band, of course my brother, but also Bela, and then our original member, Howard Levy, who played harmonica and keyboards.
Yeah.
Phenomenal musician. So all of a sudden I'm finding myself playing in these weird time meters. And, it was more fusion music than the fusion music I had played, learning Stanley Clarke, Return to Forever, and Weather Report stuff. This was even more fusion than that. Because it was blending everything, Bulgarian music, and klezmer music as well as bluegrass and jazz. So it was really, really different. And I quickly grew as a musician. And also because as a bass player, I had the freedom to create my own parts. No one was telling me what to play. You know, the parts that I played were mine. And so I had that freedom within this amazing musical context. And that's always a great atmosphere for growing.
Okay. I read where you'd perform with such people as Branford Marsalis and Mike Stern and Bruce Hornsby and Chick Corea, Dave Matthews and Prince and Kev Mo. Are there any particular things that that you picked up from those experiences that helped helped you as far as being a solo musician?
Absolutely, yeah. When you get a chance to play with those great musicians, if you play it smart, there's no way not to learn. See, a lot of people will go into those situations with the attitude is, let me show you what I can do. And I go into those situations knowing that, wow, this is a great opportunity to learn from these masters. So the one time I got to actually be on stage next to Prince was amazing. I had my eyes and my ears wide open.
Yeah.
And Prince is a top-notch musician, but he's also an incredible performer.
Yeah.
And I understand the importance of performing. When you have an audience, on a record is one thing, but when they're watching you, then everything you do on stage needs to be interesting and appealing. And Prince is all about that.
I get the impression from how much he loves music. Sitting in I knew he was coming in town. This was several years ago, and but I hadn't planned to go to the concert or anything like that. But the night before, I'm out at a hotel in one of our shopping districts here, and sitting in the lounge in the hotel, and and I knew they had a piano there. I knew they usually have a jazz band there, and I heard this piano player playing, and I'm saying, like, this doesn't sound like the fella that normally plays it. That's been
yeah.
And looked up, and it was Prince, just playing with the rest of the rhythm section of that group. And it was just incredible. This wasn't Kiss, this wasn't Purple Rain. This was just some standards that he was playing piano on, but that versatility. And
he's amazing.
That was my point in the different acts, the different artists that you played with, and the necessity for being the willingness to keep your heart and mind open to so that you're able to work with them, and eventually that should come to work for you as well. So,
well, I've been fortunate enough, like with the Flecktones, we've had Branford Marsalis on our records, we've had Dave Matthews on our records, and so it's been nice to to get to work in different contexts, them on our records or us on their records, and basically we're just friends as people. And what we do is music, so we include each other in what we do. But in the most cases, these people are very, very friendly people and very nice people to hang around with, which is why we continue to work with each other.
Tell me about the teaching aspect of your what you're doing with career wise. I mean, the camp the base camp that you have,
right.
What have you. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, that's kind of becoming almost the main part of what I do. I've been touring now for years, over 20 years, touring a lot. And I have 4 kids, wife and 4 kids, so I don't want to always stay gone from them and miss them grow up and miss the soccer games and the piano recitals and all that stuff. So with the camp that we've been doing now, we're in our 11th year. It allows me to stay involved with music, but still be around the house, and then my family can be a part of the camp. So with the camp, it's about bringing students from around the world to my location, and for a week at a time, we just stay in this one location, and I supply them with bunches of different instructors And even more importantly, we give them different experiences, because it's your experiences of life a lot of the times that determine whether someone wants to hear what you have to say musically or not.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's the same way with language. The people who have had amazing experiences, we want to hear their stories.
Right. Okay.
And what a lot of us don't realize, even musicians don't realize, is that it's the same musically. The people who have interesting stories to tell with their instrument or with their voice are the ones that we pay attention to. People like, Ray Charles and B.B. King,
mm-hmm.
and of course James Brown. They've led interesting lives, and it turns up in their music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where when you just take a musician that just practices all the time and they're not living an interesting life, their music a lot of the times feels shallow.
So you're dealing more with the total musician as opposed to just what their fingers are doing.
Exactly.
And
so one of the things we want to do with this camp is introduce people to that concept, as well as giving them some interesting different experiences, that happen throughout the week that they can bring back to their instrument.
Okay.
As well as, the regular teachings also. But we give them a lot of different ideas at this camp. It's a different week,
Do you bring any guest artists in to work with you, or is it just your
Absolutely.
basic crew? Okay.
Yeah. It's definitely not just me. If I wanted the students to only have my perspective, then I'd be the only instructor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want them to have all different types of ways, because music is huge and there's many ways of approaching it.
Yeah.
So I bring in a bunch of different guests. There's always surprise guests at every camp, people that they had no idea were coming, and that's always exciting,
Yeah.
So it's a fun week, very, very, very fun week.
Cool. Now, let's talk about the book that you've written, and and you say it's now in audio form as well. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, from teaching workshops and clinics at stores and schools, as well as the camp, students over the years have kept asking me to write a book, because my outlook on music, I've found over the years that it's a little bit different than most teachers, I would say. So I teach music slightly different, or actually drastically different. So people were asking for a book, and I knew they wanted an instruction book with lessons and things. And that's exactly what I didn't want to write. I didn't want to write that. So I stayed away from writing a book for many years, until it dawned on me that I could do it as a story. Instead of writing an instruction book, I could put the same instruction and the same ideas in story form, the way our ancestors used to teach.
Uh-huh.
So I just wrote a story about a teacher and a student, and the lessons are in there. But because it's a story and I call it fiction, I can even go further with it and put, different things in there that wouldn't fly too well in an instruction book, because people would spend too much time trying to figure out whether it was real or not, or true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But in a story, it's like going to see, Star Wars or Avatar. We just go for the enjoyment of it. We don't analyze it to figure out what's truth and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote the book that way, and it's now been translated into 4 different languages. This is very, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And on my own, I went back and recorded an audio version, so you can listen to the story, and you can actually hear the musical examples in the book as they're talked about. There's lots of music and things going on behind in the background. But the cool thing about the book is every character in the book is read by a different voice. And so I have some, like one of my favorite bass players of all time is a guy by the name of Chuck Rainey.
Oh, yeah.
And he's played on everything from, Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World to the Sanford and Son theme to Steely Dan's, best songs, to Aretha Franklin.
Yeah, I got hip to him with Donald Byrd during the 70s, the Street Lady and all of those. Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, he's reading one of the characters.
Oh, okay.
Because when I wrote this character named Uncle Clyde, who's this old harmonica player, I had Chuck Rainey pictured in my head, so I was able to get him to read that part. And so, you know, and there's lots of guest musicians and lots of guest speakers on this book. And I'm excited because I just got my first copy of it today. We've been pre-selling them on my website, VictorWooten.com. But tonight, people will have the first opportunity to actually purchase and have the physical audio book, and it's 7 CDs worth of book and music.
Okay.
So it's a big project.
Well, what else do you have planned down the road? Any chance of you and Stanley and Marcus getting together again or anything?
Well, we hope. I mean, I definitely hope so. When we finished our tour in 2009, we talked about giving it a year break. And possibly coming back in 2011 with something different, a tour. We actually recorded a show, a live show, a DVD, so we may put that together and come out. So I hope we do it again, because for me it was like a dream come true, getting to play with 2 of my heroes.
Well, I was going to say, besides Palmistry and Soul Circus, one of the CDs that I get requests on is definitely Thunder.
Yeah.
You know, it definitely is, and I mean, there's several tunes off of there. They like, including, and as well as the title track. So
yeah.
But at this stage, Victor, I really want to thank you for taking the time out.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speaking with you.
And we'll keep in mind here. We'll see you at Grinders tonight.
All right,
and,
great.
You take care here.
Thank you very much, Barry.
All right, bye bye.
Bye bye.